Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. Wanted to throw out a little video today. I got a load that I picked up at, I call it the Cheese Cave in Springfield. Anybody who's been there knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that load's going to Bethlehem, PA. I can drop it anytime after midnight tonight. I won't get there quite that soon, but I will get there tomorrow, and then I don't know, I'll probably have to I'm not sure if I can I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about whether I have to leave with the trailer or not, so we'll see. If I do, I'll just get rid of the trailer probably at Hershey on my way home. So there was a place I went near the other day, actually yesterday, and I just wanted to mention it. It's always been something that kind of fascinated me, or I had this morbid curiosity about, and it's the town of Coffeyville, Kansas. And I've probably already given away what I'm going to talk about, but on October 5th, 1892, the infamous Dalton gang decided that they were going to rob two banks simultaneously in Coffeyville, Kansas. And they kind of snuck into town. This was a pretty audacious plan. And, can't fault them for trying. They were pretty successful train robbers and had kind of terrorized Oklahoma, robbing trains and stuff. But they ventured up to Coffeyville and with this plan to rob two different banks. So they kind of quietly ride into town, but one of the members of the gang was spotted as they were kind of like making their way to the two banks. They split up and went to both banks, and so they were recognized by a townsperson who quietly passed the word, and like everybody showed up with guns outside the banks. And needless to say, the Daltons did not leave Coffeyville the same way they came in. This is how they left. Now I will say that this was a fair fight, because the Daltons put up a lot of strong resistance to probably what was pretty significant force, and they ended up killing 4 townspeople. In addition to the 4 guys you see laid out there, Emmett Dalton was wounded in the attack. Now, some of the Daltons were pretty young guys, like early 20s. And Emmett, it turns out, he's wounded, he recovers from his wounds, and he goes to prison for life. Except after about 14 years, he got paroled. And it's kind of interesting when you think about like Old West justice, like hang 'em high and stuff like that, because I've looked at a lot of these cases where somebody survived something that was with a criminal element, and they often did very little prison time. Like, they weren't executed. Like, if this happened today and there was a big ass bank robbery and shootout and 4 non-criminals died in the process, I'm pretty sure that the bank robber that survived would, depending on the jurisdiction, would be looking at the death penalty. And certainly wouldn't do just 4 years or 14 years in prison before kind of being pardoned and released, But anyway, that's what happened to Emmett, and he moves out to Hollywood, and he basically trades on his infamy, trades on the fact that he was like this famous outlaw, and he, wrote screenplays, did movie, consulting and stuff, and he didn't die till 1937, so... Anyway, that's a little bit about Coffeyville, Kansas. So if you're gonna rob a bank, just do one at a time and make sure you're not recognized. So that's that update. I did want to talk about something that I came across. And I always think, I read a lot about our industry, and I read a lot about, our industry and where I think trends might be going. And also sometimes I come across some, like news-ish items. And I came across a thing on transportationnation.com. And it actually I don't know why it came up, but it did. And it was this article from 2019. And if you recall, back in 2019, the FMCSA was considering changes to the hours of service rules. And that's how we ended up getting the change that says you can do a half an hour break without actually being off duty. Like, you can be on duty, yard move, and then, of course, off duty, sleeper berth, whatever. So a lot of us have been able to, do our half an hour break legit while fueling or while doing a drop and hook or whatever. So anyway, there were public hearings on this. And this guy named Joshua Williams, who's from Memphis, is a truck driver. And he went to a hearing, and they basically have open mic, right? Like, you can make comments on proposed rule changes. You can get up and just say your spiel. So he gets up, and he doesn't really talk about the rule. He's talking about people having CDLs that, quote, don't speak English. And, he gives this spiel, and then, at the end of it, the person who was chairing the meeting was basically like, do you have anything to say on the proposed rule change? And then he said there should be an exemption for hours of service for people that haul gear for the military. And I'm just like, nah. Because it turns out the military, having been in the military and having gotten flatbeds pulling up on the tarmac or whatever, it's like, when stuff shows up, it shows up. Like, the military is not counting on any civilian truck driver driving something from one, naval supply center or defense logistics agency to some base or whatever. I mean, that's not how we roll. We're just like, whatever we got, we're going with. So if something shows up, great. If it doesn't, we're still gonna, it's not like we're like, oh, hey, can we have a timeout on this war because there's a guy that only could drive for 11 hours and our shit isn't here yet. That's not how it works. So anyway, but getting back to what he went there to speak about, he said that, and these are directly from the article, he said that there were people hitting bridges and buildings. And all of this is premised on the idea that the reason for any of this stuff that he was talking about was that people can get a CDL who don't speak English. Now, before I get into this, here's how it works. The FMC, the federal regulations say that somebody has to be able to basically reasonably communicate to the public, understand road signs, reply to official requests in English. Reasonably communicate. It doesn't say fluent in English. And since the states all license people, right? This is not something the federal government does, right? They don't license any of us who have CDLs. In most states, and I don't have the number, but I'm guessing it's more than 50% of the states, you don't have to be able to speak or read English to take a written test at the motor vehicle department, whether it's the DMV, MVA, whatever you call it. I know for a fact that in Pennsylvania, you could be illiterate and still pass that any written test. And the reason I know this is because the test, you take it on a computer and it reads you the questions and reads you the answer choices. So if you know the difference between an A, a B, a C, and a D, you can pick, like if you understand what they're saying, not that you can read it, but you understand what they're saying, because you put headphones on. It's basically like an oral examination. And then the other piece of it is that when you're taking the skills assessment, the skills test, the driving test, you have to understand commands from the examiner in English. So as long as you can understand what the examiner is telling you to do, and by the way, I don't know how anybody could pass the pre-trip portion where they're explaining what they're doing on a brake check without speaking some English. I just don't know how that would happen. I mean, you know, I just can't see that. But anyway, supposing for a moment that somebody really doesn't speak English or speak it very well and they can't read it. You know, he said people are hitting bridges and buildings, right? But let me say this. I've never driven a commercial vehicle in a foreign country. But I'm pretty sure if I was, the fact that I don't speak the language of the majority of the people in that country doesn't necessarily mean that I would hit a building, right? I've been all over the world. I've been to places where the predominant language is Arabic. I know how to say a couple of things in Arabic. I've been to Europe. I speak pretty good French. I speak okay Spanish. You know, I've been to other places. I don't speak any Urdu, but you know, people speak English lots of places. But even if I was in the most remote place where nobody speaks English and I have zero concept of the language, I wouldn't run into a building. But if I did, it wouldn't be because I didn't speak the local language. Okay? That's just not a thing. And as far as bridges go, bridges are more than, they're basically Arabic numbers. What? Arabic? Yeah, the numbers we use are actually Arabic numbers. Notice we don't use Roman numerals, right? Yeah, I can't even imagine doing bridge calculations with Roman numerals. People would be like, I thought the 3 was after the 10, not before it. You know, because like 9 is IX, right? So, anyway, so then he said this. He said, quote, this is a quote, that people are going down places we ain't supposed to be going down. I don't know what we're going down. Maybe not places, maybe like roads, streets, abandoned gold mines. I don't know. He said, people, because they don't speak English, they're turning on roads that say no trucks. They're making right turns that are illegal, and they're taking bridges out. You know, and he said that immigrants are taking advantage of our laws. But I don't actually, you know, somebody has a green card, for example. They're authorized to work in this country, which means they're authorized to get a license. So that's the law. I don't know. I mean, yes, they're taking advantage of it, but they're just doing what they're allowed to do. And then he says, without any evidence, without any data, wrecks have gone up because we give CDLs to people who can't read English. I'm no expert on traffic safety, but I'm not seeing a cause and effect here. You know, I think we have, if wrecks have gone up, it might, in raw numbers, might be because of traffic volume. Or it might just be because people drive like frickin' maniacs generally, and it doesn't have anything to do with the language. they understand or speak. And then he also, as some of the evidence for this, pointed out the bribery scandals in Texas and California. Now, bribery doesn't really have anything to do with whether or not you speak English. But what it does have to do is people that can't pass the test. I mean, Illinois, the Secretary of State, when I used to live in Illinois, there was a huge investigation. People went to jail because they would just pass out CDLs, right? Because even if somebody speaks English, right, if they don't want to go through the process of getting a CDL, they just want one, they could go and pay somebody at the Secretary of State's office in Illinois. They could just slip them like $3,000 and bam, they're a CDL holder. And then he said people need to learn our language. So I kind of reject this premise that if there are, elevated numbers of accidents, that it's because people don't speak English. And here's why I reject that. I see people every single day that are driving down the highway and it says their lane is ending. And, you can kind of tell a lot about somebody by what they put on their truck. I just don't, I think they're not paying attention, right? And I think people just generally don't read road signs. Now, I've driven down roads that clearly had the little red circle with the slash through it with the truck behind it. Like one time I was trying to make a delivery and I was like, and it was like kind of random. And I just got into this no truck going any direction trap. And it was a Saturday. I looked around. I'm like, I'm going down this road because it's the most direct route to this place I'm going. And I did. So it's not, I knew I wasn't supposed to be on that road. I just disregarded it. Okay. And my GPS had kind of led me the wrong way. Bridge heights. There's a channel, and I think it's called 11'8", and it's on YouTube. It's very popular, and it's this channel of a bridge in North Carolina. I think around Greensboro, Raleigh, that area. It's a railroad bridge, and there's an underpass. But the underpass used to be like 10 foot something, and they raised it up a little bit. They created a little more room. But there are warning signs, blinking lights, I mean, you name it, right? Like, they do everything but actually throw a gate in front of you if you're over height. And guess what? That thing gets clobbered all the time. Mostly by box trucks, but I've seen people clobber it with semis, with vans on the back, RVs ripping their air conditioning unit off. I can't believe that it's because all these people don't speak English, right? I just don't believe that. I believe people aren't paying any frickin' attention. They're on their phone. They don't know how tall their rental rider truck is, or they just are like zoning out. It happens all the time to people that are fluent in English and only speak English. But let's go a step further. What if I said, and now we're going to the VAT board because this is a visual lesson. So I'm going to show you a couple of drawings that I made that are reasonable facsimiles of road signs you may see. And these first two signs, number 1, number 2, okay? Now, all of you have seen these signs, but I've recently encountered actual truck drivers, people who speak English, people with CDLs, who don't know the difference between this sign and this sign. And if you think there's not a difference, then you don't know the meaning of road signs. And it has nothing to do with how fluent you are in English. Okay? And so here I'll tell you what the difference is. This sign means that there's traffic merging from the right that does not have its own lane, that is going to have to merge into the lane that's on the right, okay, like at an on-ramp. This sign means there's traffic merging onto the highway, but they have their own lane, and what that means to you as a truck driver is you don't really need to move left. Now, technically, you don't need to move left here either because you have the right of way. But this means they get their own lane. You don't have to worry about, oh, I'm trying to get over, I got my blinker on. And you know how I know drivers don't know the difference between these signs? Is how they act on the highway. And this has nothing to do with language because there's no freaking words on these signs. But let me show you a sign that does have words. This one right here, number 3, speed limit 55. Is it okay for me to interpret when I see this sign and I'm doing 55 that every driver passing me doesn't speak English? Because it's written in English. But I have to assume that when somebody's going 65 or 70 in a semi, that they must not speak English because the sign clearly says speed limit 55. Or maybe they just didn't see it because they were on their cell phone. But I think you get my point. Right? When people talk about people speaking English and they talk about the trucking industry, it's mostly a racist rant. And let me share a secret with you if you've never had any foreign language training or you've never traveled to foreign countries or you just don't ever talk to anybody that's not from that looks like you from your area. A lot of people in this country speak to each other in languages other than English. I would suggest to you that the major ones they're speaking are Spanish, Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic, okay? Those are the major ones. But guess what? Almost everybody that you encounter in this country, almost everybody that's speaking in one of those languages to somebody else probably speaks English. But here's how you need to think about it. I was talking to Lyle at No Hippie Trucking and Transportation yesterday. I got to see him at the terminal in Springfield. I said to him, you've traveled overseas, I've traveled overseas, we were both in the military. If you and I were in Germany, even if we were both pretty good at speaking German, if we were talking to each other, we wouldn't be doing it in German. We'd be speaking English to each other. Why? Because that's our primary language. That's our first language. Doesn't mean we can't speak German or Urdu or Arabic or Mandarin. It just means that's how we are communicating to each other. So, if you think that the biggest problem the trucking industry has is people not speaking English, all I say is look at the road signs and judge people based on their behavior on the road, not on whether or not they, know every word in the English language or whether they speak to their friends in English or not. So that's kind of my rant for today. But like I said, and I'm happy to field comments on this, but I just think we got more important things to worry about than trying to figure out whether somebody's speaking the correct language. And by the way, the United States does not have and never has had and probably never will have an official language. And I think that's kind of good. I kind of like that. I like that I grew up around people, husbands and wives, who spoke to each other in other languages. I grew up around people that spoke Dutch to each other, German, Italian. I think it's nice that people speak Spanish to, their family and friends. I think it's a good thing, and it's what makes America great. So anyway, I will talk to you guys later, and be safe out there, and hopefully I get home tomorrow after all. So, and by the way, on part of my trip tomorrow, I may have a special guest. So we'll have to see how that goes. But anyway, I will talk to you soon. Bye.